I think we are now ready to start, and I will hand over to Caroline to start this presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Johan. So hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Lee, and for today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on how you can protect your Box application. Next slide, please, Johan. Awesome. So why do we want to protect Box? So Box is one of the most popular applications when it comes to cloud storage, and it houses a ton of data. You can see that we have a link here to a TechCrunch article where companies have been subjected to data leakage because they haven't configured their Box accounts properly. So how can we protect Box? There are two fronts that we recommend here. The first being is around our threat detections. Within MCAS, there's a number of built-in anomaly detections that you can leverage to protect your Box application, such as impossible travel activity, mass download, malware, and admins have the ability to take actions on these if they find a user is compromised. Next, and probably the most important, is protecting the data that resides within your Box application. Through our integrations with Microsoft Information Protection, you can look for documents that contain sensitive data and apply things such as the sensitivity label. Next slide, please, Johan. So what exactly are we trying to prevent? We have a number of use cases here, the most common ones that we see, and we'll be demoing some of these as well. The first is around publicly accessible links. So making sure that you've configured your file policies to prevent this type of data leakage. The second one is specific to Box, which is detecting a watermark label change. The third is just around our common DLP policies. So creating policies to look for sensitive information types such as social security numbers, credit card numbers, and applying governance controls around them. And then lastly is our cloud-based threats. So again, leveraging our built-in detections to make sure we prevent things such as stolen accounts and compromised users. Next slide, please, Johan. And here is where MCAS comes in. So let's have a quick lesson on MCAS. I'm not going to go into too much granular detail here, but for those of you who aren't aware of what MCAS is, it's what we call a Cloud Access Security Broker, or AKA a CASB. What makes MCAS unique is its integrations across the Microsoft security stack. So for example, endpoint detection and response. This is our integration with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint for our Shadow IT feature set. Next, we have our secure access layer. So leveraging Azure Active Directory for our conditional access policies and using our reverse proxy. Next, we have our data loss prevention. So again, this is creating those file policies using our integrations with MIP to apply sensitivity labels to those documents. Our unified endpoint management. So being able to scope out your conditional access app control policies to look for things such as non-compliant devices. We have our cloud security posture management. So not only surfacing recommendations for Azure, but for other cloud platforms such as GCP or AWS, leveraging the CIS benchmarks. And then lastly, we have our threat signals. So using our integrations with the threat intelligence and UEBA, so detecting when a user has deviated from their learned baseline to surface detections such as mass download or maybe activity from an infrequent country. All right, Johan, I'll pass it to you for a quick config lesson.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you. So now we'll try to see how you can quickly apply the configuration that Caroline just mentioned and have some quick value in your Box deployment to make sure that you add some level of security. So with that being said, we want to share 4 very important scenarios that we have seen a number of customers either struggling with or at least asking questions about, and we want to make sure we make these as simple as possible so that you can have the simplest value possible for your environment. So use case number 1, identifying public shared links in Box. Public shared link are something that exists in a number of other cloud sharing applications. even in OneDrive, in Dropbox, in G Suite. But in Box, it is also very important, and it has been known to create some unwanted or mistakenly shared files, and they can very easily be sometimes even browsed by public users and obviously downloaded, obtained. So that's something we want to prevent. To simplify your configuration here, we came up with very simple policy templates. So instead of having to look for which settings, all you have to do is select the proper templates, as you can see here in this capture. That will help you simply have this data available. And as soon as there are new files or folders that are shared publicly with a public shared link, you will be able to see that, get a notification if needed, even take action automatically. And you can add additional filters. So this is what is by default, but if you only want to add filters, for example, for sensitive data, such as credit card numbers or social security numbers, or anything that matters to your business, obviously, you can also add that. So you can limit the amount of data that will trigger these kind of alerts. That's for use case number 1. Use case number 2 is very, very much related to Box, and it's something that is built in Box itself, so much more tailored for this application. In Box, there is a concept that we call watermark, and those kind of watermark labels are here to help you classify your documents and be able to apply some kind of labeling to see which documents are confidential, which documents are more public or highly confidential, depending on the kind of watermark you intend to configure. Changing those watermarks can sometimes indicate some attempt to exfiltrate data, which obviously you want to prevent or at least detect as fast as possible. And this is why we came up with this, again, this policy template. You don't have to look for those settings and those detailed filters. All you have to do is create those policies based on the templates, which I will show you in the demo in a few minutes. And you will be able to detect when there is a watermark label change, either creation or deletion. That would be effectively also a change. And you can apply any kind of additional filtering. A typical example would be filtering on the number of users or a certain amount of groups that are allowed to perform those changes, as opposed to regular users who would not be allowed to apply these kind of watermark changes. You can also have some kind of remediation, disabling the user, for example, that changes those kind of labels. These are all things that are possible and that you can do in Cloud App Security. Third use case. More general use case, but DLP policies in MCAS. And this is something that's very, very relevant. This is probably the most common thing that we are asked about when it comes to Box configuration, for that matter, for other apps as well. And the beauty of Microsoft Cloud App Security is that when you have data that you want to detect within your cloud environments, you can do it with a single policy. So in that case, I'm just, you can see in this screen capture, we just have an example of how to detect files that are shared and that contain a credit card number. The policy actually applies to Box, but also to other applications if I want to. We can filter it only to Box or only to any application. But the beauty is that you will have unified DLP policies among your different applications. We will play a little bit with those settings during the demo, and we will show you how simple it is to configure. And with no further ado, let's go with our demo. So I assume a number of the attendees here have seen the Cloud App Security interface before. If you haven't, when you open it, you simply get to the dashboard telling you if there are some alerts open, if there are, well, files that are infected. We'll talk about malware and threat detection in a few minutes as well. And you can see users to investigate. Today, we're going to focus on number 1, policies, and number 2, how to manage your files in Box. So let's start with policies. I told you about those magic little templates that we came up with. Let's try to use one of them. So here I'm going to create what we call an activity policy. And we're going to apply a template that is very specifically made for Box. You can see that we have templates for several different applications. Today, we're going to play with this one, unauthorized watermark label changes. As you can see, the activity type here has been populated automatically to detect label changes, and it applies only to box, obviously. You can add as many filters as you want. As I said, you can simply add a filter for a user if you want those users to be parts of a group, for example. So let's say only box administrators in that case could make those changes, or you could apply any other changes that is part of those filter. So there's a number of them. You can browse through them, because obviously it would take us much longer than this webinar to go through all the filtering options you have for those policies. Once your policy is ready, you can create it. You can decide how you want the alerts to behave: an email, a text message, or just showing up in the console. That's also very much of a possibility. And if you'd like, you can also apply a Power Automate automated workflow. That's an option that exists with every policy in Cloud App Security. And finally, you can decide of governance actions you want to take. So in that case here, for activity policies, Box APIs let us suspend a user. If you're afraid that this user might either be rogue or compromised, you can suspend that user account automatically, and you will be able to stop the bleeding in case something unexpected is happening. I'm going to show you another scenario. So that was scenario number 2. Let's go with scenario number 3 that we covered in our slide deck earlier. I want to talk to you about what we call file policies. The goal of file policies is to help you review the files that are in your environment, possibly inspect them or detect some of their properties and alert or apply a change, apply a governance action automatically. So with that being said, let's review that page. So you can see we have a page for file investigation, and it contains the list of all files. Here I filtered it to box only, and I filtered it to files that are public or external. And you can see there's a number of them. So if I want to create a policy that would be based on my search, I can certainly do that and click that button. And here it's going to bring me to the page where I can create a new file policy. You can see my filters are already here pre-populated. I can add as many filters as I want. If, for example, I want to only apply policy to files that are owned by certain users, or if I only want to apply policies that are for file on a certain type, that's also a possibility. Let's say I want to apply the policy to all type of files from everybody, but that contain only some kind of sensitive data types.
Hey, Jan, if you could zoom in, looks like the audience is having some issues with the resolution. That would be great.
Of course. Excellent. I think that should be better.
Yes.
So perfect. Thank you. So just reviewing the settings again to make sure that everyone is able to see them. It is true that my resolution was quite small. We configured a policy here to help us detect files that are stored in Box that have an access level being public or external, which means accessible by anybody outside the organization. There's a number of filters we can use. I will just browse through them very quickly to give you a quick idea of what kind of filters we can have. File type, file classification. You can even go with file name or extension in that case if that's something that you really care about. But in our case today, we're just going to focus on a specific data type that would be stored in the file. So we're going to choose our inspection method, and we're going to pick for a sensitive information type. So in that case, we're going to go with financial. We're going to pick something very simple, a credit card number. That's international. That speaks to almost every organization out there. And we're going to apply that. And then we can decide a few extra settings. So for example, we can say that we only want to detect files that contain more than 10 credit card numbers, which makes much more sense in some cases because you could have one person storing his own credit card number, or family credit card numbers, which is probably a bad idea, but you may not want to alert for all these cases when you're a very large organization. But if it's 10, 15, 20 credit card numbers, it's probably starting to be a small database. And then you want to be much more careful and start triggering these alerts. You can decide that you want to unmask the last 4 characters of a match, if that's something that that helps you to identify or detect what kind of data was stored. And then you can decide if you want or not to have an alert. You can decide that anytime there's a new file that is detected, you will send an email or a text message, or you will decide that you don't care about an alert. All you want is the file to be matched, and so you can review it at your own pace, or you may want to apply governance actions. So opening the box category here for the governance actions, you can see there's a number of things you can do, and a lot of them would be very often enough to make sure that you maintain a high level of data control in your environment. So you can send an email to the user telling that user that this is not something that should be shared, for example, or you can notify some specific administrators if that's something you would want to do. You can unshare the file. You can apply different settings, such as an expiration date, which is also a very box-specific feature here. Put the file in quarantine, or my favorite out there, apply a classification label. So classification label would be using AIP, MIP classification labels, and you are most likely, some of you are familiar with how you can apply those labels to files stored in a Microsoft environment, whether it's on-prem or in your OneDrive/SharePoint, but you can also automatically apply those labels in third-party file storage solutions such as Box using Microsoft Cloud App Security. And you can say that if a file contains a credit card number and is shared, you're going to make it high confidential. And this way, if anybody is trying to access that file, they will have an issue with just reading it, simply because the protection will be embedded in the file. So this is the kind of things you can do with Cloud App Security in terms of protecting your environment, protecting your files in Box. Now I'm going to go back to our favorite slide deck, and we'll talk about use case number 4 with threat protection. Before we go that, are there unanswered questions in the chat so far? I'll take this as a no. I'll re-ask the question after discussing threat detection. So we talked about protecting your data. It's obviously, you used Box for storing data. That's the first thing you want to do, making sure that your data is safe and anything that even remotely looks like a remote access is controlled or is accounted for. But you also want to protect your environment just like any other cloud application, any other environment, with simple, or I shouldn't say simple, but very more generic protection or detection methods in your environment. This includes things such as malware detection, especially because we're storing files in Box, detecting any kind of unwanted access, such as access from a suspicious IP address, from an infrequent country, when you have impossible travel between sessions. For example, somebody connecting from America and somebody else connecting from, in the same account, I'm sorry, connecting from Europe. That would be obviously an impossible session, and any kind of suspicious user agent. We also try to detect things such as unusual file activities, like unusual file share activities or unusual file download. All these things are very important to make sure that if there is an account that is already compromised, we can detect even post-breach what is still happening in terms of risky activity. The typical one is also ransomware. Very often your Box account is not going to be compromised, but if a machine is compromised and is syncing up with Box, you may see the ransomware in your Box account. And this is something we also want to prevent, or at least we want to know about it as quickly as this happens. So we have a policy that is here to help you do that. We also have a number of ways to detect data exfiltration. You can see here in this slide, I'm not reading all the detections. Some of them are irrelevant to Box because they would apply to other of the applications that we have. But we have some very generic, in a good sense of the term, detections that really apply all across the board to most of the applications. And this really helps you detecting any kind of suspicious access in your environment, any suspicious activity. And we want to make sure you are aware of that when this happens. And we had promised to cover all of our topics in half an hour, making you proficient with configuring MCAS to have a box in being protected by it. And I think we achieved that, at least the time frame. Now we will open it for questions. If there are any questions that are unanswered yet in the chat window, very happy to discuss them, to respond to them. From what I can see, most of them seem answered and discussed. We will stay on the line a few minutes in case there are additional points that we can bring. And no, they're not coming from me, but in New York City, you hear the sirens very often as well. So just a few resources to close that our discussion today. Feel free to we will share that deck, so you will have access to those links. You can check our main documentation for MCAS that will in most cases we'll discuss the points that we brought here together. If you're looking for something more specific to Box, we published a blog a few months back that will basically detail everything that we talked about today with a bit more details and a few videos to illustrate that. So feel free to check that out. It is the first link that you see here. And we also have our MCAS Ninja training. If any of you are not yet fully versed into MCAS and you want to go deeper with your knowledge, you're more than welcome to go with that Ninja training. It will help you from zero to hero, as we say, and you'll be able to be proficient and help your organization with securing your cloud applications using MCAS. You are welcome to also post questions on our tech community. We check it on a very regular basis and make sure that we are able to respond to questions after the webinar or at any time. And this will also include links on where you can download that webinar. So you will be able to review it offline, share the links to your teammates.
So, Jan, there's a question asking, can you apply a MIP label to a file in Box, which allows you to specify users who should have access to the file and what permissions they should have?
So in terms of files that are in stored in Box, when you apply file policies, you can apply those AIP labels. No custom permissions directly in file policies. If you're looking to apply custom permissions, I'm sorry, there is a way to do that in with our real-time control offers. So we have a part of Cloud App Security, a feature called Conditional Access App Control, which we're going to very quickly summarize as a reverse proxy, and it allows you to have real-time control over any application that you would have in the cloud. In that case, you can decide that any file that is being downloaded will be protected on the fly, and you can apply those custom policies that are discussed here.
Great. How can you match the two sensitivity labels from Box and MCAS?
Not sure which. So the sensitivity labels are you if you're referring to watermarks. I have not seen cases of conflicts between those sensitivity labels. I think they would just simply apply in parallel, and the data would be labeled on the Box side, but also on the AIP side, simply because the MIP/AIP labels would apply to any Office file.
I see. Great. Seems like there's various license questions, and maybe you can elaborate on that. What's required to use these policies as far as licensing goes?
Excellent question. So what you need for anything that I showed you today is a license to Microsoft Cloud App Security. So you can buy licenses to Microsoft Cloud App Security standalone, but most of the customers that we work with have it as a package, as the suites that we provide. So for example, it would be part of Microsoft 365 E5 or EMS E5 as well. And that will allow you to create all those policies. And when it comes to Box, having simply also MCAS licenses would allow you to have malware detection. It would be part of it.
Okay. Can MCAS detect by specific file types for DLP policies, like detect AutoCAD files and respond with governance action?
I am out of memory, and I'm not 100% sure that AutoCAD files are part of the list of files that we cover. I can certainly double check that, but we have we cover a large number of files when it comes to content inspection. If it comes to and so you can decide that you want to have a policy that applies only to certain type of files. When it comes to AutoCAD, I would have to double check that. If you can type the name of the extension, that would be helpful as well. And if you post your question in one of the communities, that's a perfect way to have an offline follow-up after this webinar, so we can get back to you.
Okay. We have 1 more minute to go, so let me just see if we have another one here. Looks like another one related to architecture and design, perhaps AutoCAD, so I'm going to skip that one. Now, this is more like on a roadmap site, and this is a public webinar, so let's just see what you can answer on this one. Are there any planned updates to increase the limits on the daily amount of AIP sensitivity labels that can be applied to files by MCAS?
Excellent question. So there is a limit of labels that we can apply in a day for 2 reasons. Number 1, performance. Number 2, making sure that we avoid catastrophic errors. We've seen cases where customers would apply a policy that would not necessarily be what they were expecting and would classify way too much files. So this is something for which we have fail-safes, and there is a limit by default of 100 files that are classified by AIP. It is possible to bump that number up by opening a call with our support teams, but the maximum we have bumped it is still about 3,000, if my memory is not mistaken. So some customers would have needs for more. We understand that. We have not been able to push that as of now. I am not aware of plans, but if there are changes in that area, we will definitely publish it. And in the meantime, the feedback is valuable. If you can paste the kind of amount of files, an ID of how many files you would expect MCAS to be able to label per day, that would be a good information for us to take as a feedback.
Okay, great. That's it from my side.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. You're welcome to drop if you'd like or ask more questions. I will stay on the line a few more minutes to monitor any additional questions that would show up. But if anything comes up while you start configuring Microsoft Cloud App Security, you are more than welcome to post your questions in our security community, as you can see the slide here, and we'll be very happy to take time and respond to you and assist you, making sure you have the best experience with our product. Thank you all. So I see there's another question. I'll respond speaking to it. Is there a way to tune out false positives related to impossible travel when one login is coming from VPN and another one from the true location of the device, and the two IPs are geographically very far away? So what should be done in those cases is configuring different IP addresses within MCAS configurations. So configuring VPN IP addresses as well as corporate IP addresses, because what's going to matter is where the device is coming out of. So if we see that there are two connections coming from a corporate IP, or one connection coming from a known device and a corporate IP, we would automatically suppress those kind of alerts. So it is important that this data is properly configured. There's also a learning mechanism, a time of profiling. So after time, usually the number of alerts would go down while we learn which devices are known or unknown. I see another question. Can you auto label AIP? Can you auto apply AIP label to a folder in Box where the file doesn't necessarily have sensitive information? Basically, force the files located in the folder to a specific label. So I see that Idan responded to this one. Is there any progress bar? Does it showing scan and detection? So to show scan and detection progress, not as of now. Something we're reviewing for the future, but it's not there in the product as of today. How can we tune data leak cloud alerts? Depends which one you're referring to. So some of the alerts can be configured manually, and you can then create alerts. For example, a mass download alert is based on a policy template, just like the other templates that I showed earlier today. And you can tweak it as much as you like. So you could tweak the number of downloads times per the amount of time that you would like. So for example, if the default is not good for you, but you decide that in your case, it is important to detect files that are when there is more than, let's say, 50 downloads in 10 minutes, that's something you could configure very simply. I see no more questions in the past 5 minutes. With no further ado, we will end that session. Thank you all, specifically those staying up until the end, for listening to us and joining our webinar. We'll have more in the future, so please stay tuned and review our community posts. Thank you.